Hi 1301 students, this is Miss Moore. I just wanted to send you a quick video to go over some of the concepts that we would have talked about in class this morning if we had had class. So very quickly, let me just run through all of this. In your email, I remind you of due dates and everything that's due this week and the peer review. So this video is mainly just to go over some content that we would have gone over in class. If you have your book, have it in front of you. If you don't, pause it and go get your book so that you can kind of follow along with this outline. So the first thing I wanted to note was the source use examples in chapter 26, page 460 and 461. This is a good look at what to do and not to do in your own work. You'll notice that the example on 460 doesn't have any citations. This is not a good sign. We need to avoid this. We need to look more like the paper on page 461 that has citations in parentheses, that shows page numbers, introduces quotes, things like that. So study those two to give you a good idea of a poor and a strong paper, looking forward to your essay 5 looking like this strong paper on 461. So that's one thing that I had on the schedule for this morning. Another thing is just recognizing what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. I think most of you know these concepts well, and I think your chapter outlines it well. So just a reminder on page 463, different ways that you can fall into plagiarism traps. Especially I see a lot of times neglecting quotation marks, just forgetting to put quotation marks, forgetting to cite someone else's ideas and making them seem like your own. A lot of this we also went over last Wednesday as we talked about paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. So hopefully that was kind of a review from that. Avoiding plagiarism is pretty simple. Avoiding plagiarism means getting your work done early so that you can double check. Being organized is a big part of avoiding plagiarism. And but what I really wanted to talk about at the end of chapter 26, I think these avoiding other source abuses is something that I see a lot in my students' work. I particularly wanted to talk about these 4 areas right here with my arrow here. First is overusing your source material, especially in such a short argument. I don't think I should see any block quotations. I don't want to see any quotations over 4 lines because we have a limited amount of space to make our argument, and I do not want you relying too heavily on source material. Underneath that, and this is on page 466 if you want to follow along. Underneath that, we have plunking quotations, kind of a funny word, but I definitely agree with this idea of just throwing a quotation in without giving me adequate introduction and explanation of the quote. We're going to talk about that just a minute in chapter 27, but as a rule of thumb, don't just throw quotations in. Some of you may be used to doing your quotations this way. The problem is that in academic papers, we want to show our sources. We want to show our credible and reliable sources. So it doesn't do you any good to throw a quotation in there without citing the source and without telling me why it's important and who said it. Again, we'll look at that in just a minute. Using blanket citations, we talked about this briefly on Wednesday as well, that if you have a citation at the end of a paragraph, I may not know what that citation refers to. You need to be sure to adequately introduce and conclude all of your citations, not just put it at the end of a paragraph. And then my last focus on this section, hopefully you'll read all of it, would be relying too heavily on one source. This is a real easy thing to do with this paper since you're not having a lot of sources. Be sure that you don't rely too heavily on one source's ideas, that you use several different sources to back up your point of view. And if you are using one source primarily, that you really only use quotations sparingly and really try to make the argument your own. Don't just rely on that one source. So those are some ways to avoid source abuses, again on 466 and 467. Please, I know I'm rushing through these, please go back and read this chapter carefully so that you'll know how to adequately cite your sources in your argument paper. Now, I didn't have you read chapter 27, but in class I wanted to point out page 476 and 477. This is a great guide for what I was talking about up here, not plunking quotations. On page 476 and 477, it gives you some guidelines on how to use your source material. And on 477, it gives this great list of what you should always do. State and explain your idea, identify and introduce the source, summarize, paraphrase, or quote the source, use the source by explaining, expanding, or refuting it, and then when it's appropriate, even refer back to the source for further development. I would hope that most of the times that you cite a source look very similar to the sample passage on page 477. Page 477 gives you a great example of introducing the source, citing the source, and then commenting on the source. So please follow that as you work on integrating your own source material into your argument. Okay, so going through chapter 27 would not be a bad idea. I just felt like that was the most pertinent information within it, and I wanted to be sure that you got to chapter 28 and you learned a little bit more about MLA documentation. Now, last Thursday, we pretty much went over how to do what we call in-text citations. So how to cite your source within your paragraph, kind of like the paragraph that we just looked at on 476 and 477. So today's class was focused on looking at the works cited. These are the two elements of MLA documentation. On page 494, your book describes in-text citations and works cited. So setting up your works cited is going to correlate with what sources you've cited within your text. So chapter 28 gives you all of these guidelines. It gives you the in-text citations again. If you don't remember that discussion from Wednesday, you'll want to look on page 500 to get you started there. You'll really want to rely on chapter 28 as you finish up your paper. I wanted to look at page 508 though. It does give you a good example of, 508 gives you a quick guide to the works cited page. It tells you how to format it, what it should look like, and basic entries there at the bottom. This was what we were going to devote most of class time today doing, is working on your works cited page. I find it really helpful to look at the sample papers. That usually gives you a good idea. And then of course this whole section, 509 and following, gives you examples of how to cite your entries. I would say for the citations that I've given you, you're basically going to follow, or for the articles that I've given you, you're basically going to follow the idea of a newspaper article, which is found on page 516. If you look at the middle of that page, you get the newspaper article. The only difference is that our newspapers are online instead of in print. And so you're going to include also the newspaper's web address and the newspaper's the date you access the newspaper, because it's not in print as that example shows. So real quick, I want to give you an example to start off with. So your Works Cited page, you're going to format it just like you have every other page. I don't have time to go through all of that today. Again, page 508 will tell you how to do that. All I really want to do is show you how your article might look. So I'm going to take the article that's given in our book, and I'm going to adapt it as if I had seen it online. So I'm still going to have the authors. I'm still going to have the title. Just like that. I'm still going to have Wall Street Journal. And I'm still going to italicize that. Here's where the difference comes in though. Since I got it online, we're pretending at least that I got it online, I'm also going to add the date that it was posted online. So I'm going to go with their date, 3 of March 2008. Now, I've got to include my online information. So I'm going to include whatever the URL for Wall Street is online. I'm not sure what it is for this example. I'm going to just put wallstreetjournal.com. So that lets me know that you got it at wallstreetjournal.com. You're also going to italicize that information. Then you're going to give me the date you accessed it. You're going to tell me that you got it from the web. Then you're going to give me the date you accessed it. So say you didn't access it until today. This is how your citation will look. I'm going to go into paragraph and make it a hanging indentation so it'll look correct. This is how your online sources are going to look. You're basically just including the date that the article was posted, the URL, web, and the date that you accessed the information. So hopefully this helps you know what most of your citations are going to look like. I'm also going to give you a little PowerPoint presentation that I have done for previous classes. I'm going to post this as well so that you can look at it. Yes, I have fun memes on it, but this is going to walk you through Works Cited as well, so this could be a good resource. Hopefully, I know I've gone very quickly through all of this. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of what we would have covered in class. And honestly, I think going to your book for help will be the best idea. I think your book gives you pretty much all the information you need to complete your paper for the peer review that's due tomorrow by the end of the day. Okay, so please email me with any questions you have, but first please thoroughly read and discuss and study the chapters before you ask me questions. I look forward to seeing your rough drafts as you complete them for tomorrow, and I really look forward to doing the peer review. I think it's going to be really helpful in completing these argument papers. Okay, I hope this helps, and I will see some of you Wednesday for peer review. Thanks.